Thank you everyone for being here again. We're going to get our talk started. So, Brian, let's start out with what is your role at Hudl and where is Hudl now? We're going to talk a lot about the early stages of Hudl, but just kind of to get an overview of kind of why people should listen to the things you're talking about.
Yeah, that's completely fair. So my role is CTO, Chief Technology Officer. And the funny thing I like to say is, as a startup, it was essentially junior developer and then maybe senior developer, and now it's finally CTO after 15 years. At the beginning of the company, it was everyone wears every hat. Everyone does everything at any given time. But we've kind of gone on that journey. Hudl started as 3 people, and we were that phase for many years. And then we had a little success, able to grow, and now it's been a little bit larger than that.
How large is it right now?
So we've got offices in about 20 countries and about 2,400 employees full-time. We work with over 180,000 teams, use our software platform for all of their analytics. So we anywhere from kind of club athletics, think like youth soccer teams, all the way up to 30 out of 30 NBA teams, to the entire EPL, English Premier League, to kind of think about most professional sports organizations at this point use our platform for their analytics.
Amazing, yeah. So originally, the reason that this is in Nebraska is because one of your first, or the first client was the Huskers, right?
Yeah, we were incredibly fortunate. The university and the program we were in kind of helped incubate entrepreneurship, truthfully. The Rakes program has a lot of roots in their foundation. And so the primary donor of that organization, which was Jeff Rakes, coincidence is his name, he's a huge athletic department supporter. So he loves Husker football, he's all about helping the Huskers win. So he came to us and said, I see this huge opportunity in sports. No one is servicing the sports market properly. Hey students, are you interested in meeting with a bunch of coaches and seeing if there's something there? So my background had nothing to do with sports. Everyone always assumes I'm some sports nut. That's not the case at all.
Sure, yeah.
I was like, oh, what'd you think of the new Husker signee last week? I was like, oh, I know nothing about it. Like that's not my jam. But so we went and met with the athletic department and sat down in a whiteboard session with the coaching staff at the time, which was the Callahan staff, and said, what could we build you to make your life better? Sky's the limit. What could we do for you? And we ended up whiteboarding with them for about an hour and a half, just kind of spitballing ideas. And then we went back, made a prototype over the next week, came back to them 7 days later and said, what do you think? Here's a prototype. And they said, well, we'll buy it today. And I said, oh, that's smoke and mirrors. There's actually nothing. It's literally, it's wireframes, a prototype, right?
Yeah.
We were, you got to fake it before you make it a little bit. So we said, okay, you're really interested. That's really cool. Why don't we agree that we're going to start this journey and we'll have something for spring ball next year.
Uh-huh.
So then the staff was really gracious. They worked with us over the next year, became our first paying customer, and we went all in with them.
I think that's huge. I mean, we see a lot in startups having a customer. We talked to Amy Johnson from LifeLoop as one of our first startup grind events, and they had a customer ready to go, and they were building their product for their first customer.
Yep.
I see that a lot in success,
it's
especially
everything.
business to business.
I always say
cases.
the closer you can get to your customer, the better. And
right.
so, having a customer before you need a customer, there's nothing better than that.
And someone that's collaborative like that,
yeah.
too. That's these are the things that we need, and you're like, well, maybe we could do this, and they're like, yes, we like that. But
we give so much credit to the Husker and the football team. They really took us on that journey. They weren't needy. They were willing to give their time. It wasn't about any kind of selfish behavior. And we came to them originally and thought maybe we should go down some kind of playbook route, some kind of virtual reality route. That's what I super nerdy and techie. And they're like, nah, that's worthless. Honestly, we just need our kids to watch video. That's really all we need. We need the kids to watch video. That's the best learning they're going to have. And you have to realize this is before YouTube. So the concept of watching video online was pretty foreign at that time. I can't even think of what sites did it.
Right.
And so we said, okay, if that's really what this is about, we can build that. You don't need DVDs to do that, and that was the genesis. But it really was based on the customer need. They told us that wasn't us coming up with that idea.
Yeah.
Truthfully.
So what was the so what did that early prototype? Let's start with the really early prototype of what you showed them. I'm interested in that. What did you, if it was wireframes or whatever?
Yeah.
How did you come up with what needed to be in that, and how did you put that together?
It was all based on that first whiteboarding session. So it was about an hour and a half with the customer, really trying to understand. The focus was on video and video on the customer's device. And we knew that. So it's okay, we need something that runs on multiple different computers. At that time, this is, again, you got to rewind 15 years, so it's a little different world. It was a thick client application that could do client-server kind of conversation, could synchronize video to an athlete's computer, whether it's like a desktop or a laptop, and make the video playable. So it's very, very simple. It showed available videos on the side as like a playlist and allowed you to play the video. And that was the prototype. I mean, it was about as simple as it sounds, and it blew coaches' minds. Because for them, it was all about just like getting the video to athletes, and then we just pitched them on the vision beyond that. It's like for them, it was about how do we have accountability for athletes. So they're handing out all these DVDs every week, and no one watched them. They went in the trash.
Yep.
So like, hey, you know what? We can track how much video they watch. Mind blowing. Like, oh my gosh, you got accountability. And oh, you know what we can also do? We can allow you to put coaches' notes on it. So we can amplify your effect as a coach, and you get essentially more time with your kids because they don't have to be in the facility. Mind blowing. And it was very, very simple. Like the first version had just one or two simple features.
Right.
And
those features were part of the first version?
Yep. And those were all part of the first version. And that was enough.
Right.
Like it didn't take a ton.
Even just the video part, like you said, you guys were doing that before YouTube was the thing.
Yeah.
So the idea of being able to host video online and everything, how did you figure out that problem? I mean, was there solutions out there that were kind of
lucky.
well documented?
Honestly, we were right at the cusp of the technologies being available to do that.
Right.
So, like it sounds so crazy to say, but like MP4s, those were just the technology that emerged. Like kind of the era of WMV, the Windows Media, right into MP4, we were right in that era, right? We were right at the availability of things like DSL and broadband.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got very, very lucky. I honestly believe if we did our company a year earlier or 2 years, it wouldn't have been possible. So it was kind of the culmination of a business need with enabling technology happened to hit right at the same time. And so we were able to kind of ride that, and web video didn't exist. So we were thick clients, but they synchronized over the web.
Right, okay.
And then we made the transition to web about 2 years later.
Right. Yeah, I think it's interesting that cusp of the problem, and there were probably other people that were trying to solve that problem at other schools and everything.
I'm sure.
But the timing was just right. I mean,
it's always about timing.
Yeah.
Right? Like if we would have come out with the company 2 years earlier, it wouldn't have worked. If it would have been a couple years later, it would have been almost cliche after YouTube, right? And so it's like that timing is critical.
Yeah, that's interesting. How do you think that, I mean, just kind of like outside of your own experience, like looking at the space that other people are building new startups in now, how do you feel, should people like obsess over whether or not they're in that kind of lightning spot, or should they just kind of build something and allow luck to happen?
Yeah, allow it to happen. Don't obsess over it.
Yeah.
Because you often don't know that until it's hindsight.
Right.
And so if you try to obsess over it, you're probably going to miss the boat. I think it is worth asking, why now? Like what is enabling me to do this now that someone else couldn't do 5 years ago? That's a fair question.
Yeah.
Because if this was enabled 5 years ago and the market was there 5 years ago, then someone or some group of people probably tried it and probably wasn't successful.
Yeah, I was listening to DoorDash talk about when they started. They just threw up a web page, but they were like, why now is that people all of a sudden have mobile phones. Yeah. People had tried to do delivery apps before that were via online, but it totally changed the game that everyone has smartphones. It was like a couple years after the iPhone had come out, which is just like, and that's a question that I hear investors ask a lot too, is why now? Like, because like you said, if there isn't a good why now and you can't answer that question, then someone probably tried it. There's probably a lot of dead dinosaurs, as they say, like laying in the path that you aren't aware of yet if you haven't done your research. And those companies are kind of hard to find too. It's like companies they're dead. Yeah, like you have to do some real digging to find those things. But so that's interesting that you guys kind of fit into that cusp also. I
think the key though, first and foremost, is being customer obsessed. Like that really is, that's number one. Like if you're filling a customer need and a real customer need and you have the market fit for that, then you will be successful. Like,
how do you balance anticipating what you think the customer is going to need and getting it in their hands so they can actually give you feedback?
Yeah, that's hard. I think if you can find customers that you can form an authentic connection with, that helps a lot. So people that can have a good perspective. We had that in Nebraska, which was extremely fortunate. There's also the flip side to that bit us. So at Nebraska, we leaned too far into one customer that was supportive, and we ended up developing pieces that were more Nebraska specific than we thought. And we tried to vet for that. So we'd ask them, hey, is this something other staffs can use? Oh yeah, of course. Like this is a really common piece of functionality. Everyone's gonna love this. And like Turns out that wasn't always the case. It even got bad enough that there was one piece of functionality we developed that only one coach actually ended up wanting. Literally one coach on one staff at one university. So it is a fine line to walk, but ultimately that's what made us successful, is working deeply integrating with our customers. I think the other thing that we did is we had this motto, everyone sells. And so, everyone would work their 5-day work week, and then we'd hit the road every week in the entire company, tech, sales, support, and we'd go and meet with customers every single weekend. So we'd go to coaching clinics, we'd go all around the country and drive, and we'd make sales, and that forces you to work with the customer and get uncomfortable and get feedback and learn what you're missing, and that gives you high volume. So it gives us high volume of feedback to actually tailor the product from there.
It's interesting that you had everyone doing that, because I think a lot of technical founders especially really don't want to do the sales piece.
It sucks.
Yeah, right.
It's hard.
And especially if your personality isn't naturally matched up with it. And sometimes we tell people, like, don't. Go find a co-founder that will. But that's interesting that you guys were just like, no, everyone has to do it. And not necessarily because you need the sales team, but more that you need to have that interface with the clients and the potential clients so that you're building everything.
Well, I'll tell you a secret. We did it originally because we had the need.
Okay.
But actually, truthfully, it evolved very quickly into something we saw the benefit of.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine me, I remember one of my first times selling, I drove down to Enid, Oklahoma, which is central Oklahoma, and me getting at a coach's clinic with all these offensive line coaches, and I'm sitting there in a booth like this trying to sell football software, and I know nothing about football. It's super intimidating, but you know what? You get feedback, and you learn how to be honest with the customer, and you learn strengths and weaknesses, and it works.
I think that's an interesting thing. Is that something that your co-founders really had to push you to do, or did you get it that was you had to do that?
I got it at the time. There was no pushing, but again, there was a necessity aspect also. So it's hard to separate those two. And at the time, in hindsight, it was super obvious, and I would do it again. And we still continue that today. So we have a program we do. It's called non-support support. It's a silly name, but basically everyone in the company helps out on support and talks to customers, and they do it for 8 to 10 hours a year. So it's not a gigantic time commit, but it forces people outside their comfort zone. It forces engineers and designers and QA to talk with customers and get feedback. So when we mess up, we hear it from the customer directly, and everyone in the company does it. And I think it's a very critical part of our culture still.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, most successful tech companies have this obsession with customer, and they're always like, how do we get closer to the customer? So that's an interesting way to do that across the whole company, not just as the founders.
There is nothing like being yelled at by a football coach when your product breaks.
Yeah, you have intense customers too.
Very intense.
Yeah,
and it's a strength, but it's also it's mostly a strength, truthfully, but it's also a challenge. They're extremely passionate. I remember it was a number of years ago now. It's probably 8 years ago, and during football season, we went down for about 30 minutes. The site went down. We had 1,500 phone calls in 30 minutes. Because it's just like, this is, our coaches use this for their lives. It's their passion. Yeah. It's not just a job for them, it's their passion. And so when we fail them, they let us know.
Right. Let us know. Yeah. So once you had that kind of first version that was built for the Huskers, what was that process from prototype to building? I mean, you said you kind of showed them the prototype and you're like, oh, we actually haven't built this yet. Yeah. How did you coordinate amongst yourselves? Was it just you working on the tech piece, or did you have other people on the team?
Yeah, just me on the tech team. So I did all the development, and then I had a business partner and a product partner. And it was actually a really great symbiotic fit. And one of my pieces of advice I always tell founders is, don't expect your work balance to always be equal among founders. That is reality. I think both my partners would say for the first couple of years, I probably had more work than them. I was the sole developer, right? But that ebbs and flows over time, and I can promise you there's been much more amount of time where my other partner David has had more work, or my other partner John has had more work, and so these things are not always going to be equal. And so at the start it was pretty heavy engineering. I was still in school at the time, and that was a tough balance. I ended up dropping out of our MBA program because it just was too much for me to balance. But we were able to use the time that I had in the MBA program to enter business plan competitions, and we used those winnings to hire interns and the first people to help out on the engineering side after about a year. So that was office space, and interns was all with business plan winnings. So I was able to kind of hopefully leverage some of that schooling time to help benefit the company.
The business plan winning, those are programs that are through the school? Or
some were, mostly through the school, but some we would travel all around the country and do them.
Okay.
So our biggest one we went to, one of the most was San Diego State had a really big one. We went out there, and I think we ended up getting $60,000-$70,000 in business plan competition winnings, which funded the first couple years. So we didn't have to do any fundraising until we actually had customers and had a product, and that was a big benefit for us.
Were you paying any of yourselves early on?
No.
It doesn't sound like that's enough to pay yourselves.
No, we didn't take any salary for many years, which was tough because like we're poor college students and we were all living in a duplex together, and that helped. And we were lucky enough to all of us had internships when we were in college, so we had some savings, so that was super helpful, and so we were able to kind of bridge it. But I think that's really critical. Like you've got to do that when you can, and we were just fortunate we had the opportunity to do that. I know not everyone has that ability, right? A lot of people are doing it later in life or have families, and that's just not a possibility, but we were in a different phase of our life, we could do that.
Yeah, I know a lot of the discussion around early stage funding is discussing that, is like, how do we give opportunities to people that can't? Because right now that's really the only way a lot of people can start a startup, but people are kind of being like, can we put investment in earlier so that mothers can start a startup without having to. It's a really big challenge.
I cannot imagine how hard it would have been to start the company with a family. I have so much respect for people doing that.
Yeah.
That's tough. That's really, really tough.
Yep. So you built the first version, and then you've continued to add so many features. I mean, is that kind of? I mean, it sounds like when you first pitched it, you had a million ideas of features. So basically, you've just been building out this suite of features. What was the early on? How did you decide what were kind of the next features to build? Once you had the kind of prototype or MVP version, how did you decide which things to start building after?
For us, it was really customer segment focused. So it's like different sports have different needs, and then different levels of that sport have slightly different needs. So think high school versus NCAA versus NFL. Like there's some core capabilities, but they have differentiations that they need, and that really drove a lot of our feature development. So we're going to focus on football, and then a big pivot was to focus on basketball. And
how early was that where you added the second sport?
It was a number of years. So the first big pivot we had was a pivot from professional sports to amateur sports. And that was due to necessity because we ran out of money. So we were really focused on professional sports. Think, Huskers. Our second customer was the New York Jets, and like, wow, we're doing great. We got an NFL team, right? And then we got the Cleveland Browns. We're like, we did this, right? And then we hit a brick wall on sales. Just no one would talk to us, and we knew our product had fit. Like our customers loved it, but no one would buy it. And it's because these professional organizations didn't trust us. We were three kids coming out of college, and they're this NFL team. And they're like, why would we trust you to run our technology? And so we basically came together and we said, we need a pivot, and we pivoted down to high schools. Very, very different price point, right? You're talking, $25,000 a sale versus $800 a sale. But we knew that friction we were feeling on the sales was, we couldn't overcome it, and we were running out of money, truthfully. Yeah. And so we had to do something. And so we took that same tech and the same vision and brought it to high schools and kind of reset our market. We had to do another fundraise, and we fundraised based on the premise of high schools and took it into American football at that level.
How soon did you know that pivot worked? How long
Very
was it
quickly,
in between?
Actually.
Okay.
Yeah, we were really lucky. So we pivoted. We took 6 months for engineering or so, and then we launched it with a beta cohort, and we were very oversubscribed. So customers were clamoring for it, like, okay, I think we're onto something. And then we grew it from that year. We probably had like 30 customers, very small, then to 200 the next year, and then 2,000 the next year. And it was just like we could not get customers on fast enough. And that's when we knew, like, okay, there's something to this high school market.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Our sales cycle is like a week or two versus 6 months. Like, turns out that's kind of nice, even though the revenue is a lot lower.
Right.
So that was a big motivator for us, and really kind of when the company took off.
What are some of the things now as CTO that you've implemented as far as adding new features and deciding what those features are? Has that changed as the company has grown and as years have gone by, how you assess those things?
Yeah, very much. I'd say that one of the difference today is it's equal amount adding and equal amount subtracting. So that's a very important difference from early days at Hudl. We never deprecated a feature or product for a decade, and then you just accumulate breadth. And it turns out that takes constant engineering effort. There's this natural entropy of decay that happens on product, and you build that up over time, and it'll weigh you down. And so honestly, like it's about equal, 50% of how do we get rid of stuff and how do we unify our platform, and then how do we expand the market and products to it. That's a huge change over a decade ago.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think a lot of people that are not technical founders don't understand that you build something and it's not just like, well, it's done. Now I just got to go sell it.
I mean, I was debugging an issue yesterday, literally. That was code that I wrote 12 years ago.
Wow.
And that's a problem, just to
Yeah.
be super clear.
Sure,
Like, I'm not proud of that. That's
Yeah.
not a good thing.
Yeah.
And like, because you have people leave the company. And so the problem is you have this, as much as you want to prevent that, you have a natural brain drain over 15 years. And so
Right.
how many people can support that code still? And so you have to make this tough choice. Do you ramp people up on old code when you're going to get rid of it in a year or two, or do you try to get off it and move on? And it's a tough balance. And so we have a lot of effort around platform unification and product unification. And like I said, it's probably like 50% of what we're doing as a company. But it allows us to move forward faster, actually. Like the net result is forward progress.
Right. Interesting. All right, I think this is a good time to open up to questions.
Great.
I feel
Perfect.
like there's a lot of questions that I have, but let's go ahead and start with Kate.
I have two. The first question is, how quickly did you bring on a UX resource or someone that was design-minded? And the second question is, because you were able to partner with such a huge corporation as three college dudes, do you have any kind of value or kind of like reciprocal kind of thing where you try to partner with really small startups as well?
Yeah, two great questions. The UX side, the cheeky answer is not nearly soon enough. Our first designer was someone that in-house started in software engineering and switched to design, and and that took 4 years, I think, before that happened, and it shows in our product. Honestly, we're kind of a weird balance. We're almost more B2B than B2C because we're working with these large sport teams. That helped a lot because you could do a lot more hands-on training. The product didn't need to be as innately discoverable. So I think that was a nice bridge, but we should have done it way sooner. Now we have dedicated design and UX on every single squad. So we have a pretty large team, and it's a very, very core part of our process and our prototyping, and they're out working with customers on the front lines before anyone else, and it's a very integral part, but it took a number of years. And I think in hindsight, I would have done it differently, but it's hindsight. So what does it look like for us to partner with startups? We're pretty mediocre at that, I would say. Again, just being honest, I don't know whether that's right or wrong. We're still very much focused on kind of us, getting our feet under us. And I know it sounds like we've been around for a long time, but it's not been the easiest ride every year. And so I feel like we're still kind of in building stability and building the company up. Also, it's tough to partner because often you see them as competitors or potentially someone to acquire, in our space at least, on the sports tech space. So we've been pretty lukewarm at kind of partnerships. We do really like to support organizations like the Nebraska Tech Collaborative and others that help in the broad startup community. So it's less on like one-on-one and more about like helping Lincoln, helping Omaha. I think it really is truly like rising water builds everyone up. We're at a shortage of talent, and one of the best ways is building a culture of that in the state, getting people to come to the state, and then hopefully we get some of them. But honestly, like if other companies get them, and then maybe we have an opportunity in the future, I think it's still that's where we want to focus and want to try to focus. It's less on kind of individual company mentorship or investment, truthfully.
You guys have acquired quite a few smaller companies.
Yes.
What was?
Yeah.
I just have a question on that. What was the? When did you start doing that, and what have been the kind of main reasons for those acquisitions?
Yeah, we've done 9 acquisitions over our years, and it really has spanned the whole spectrum. So the majority of them are customer acquisitions, so think competitors that we want to essentially buy their market share, truthfully. We've had geography acquisitions, so we want to get into a new market or geography, and we've had technology acquisitions. So think our camera tech specifically, we didn't have any expertise in manufacturing or kind of board design, and so we had to, do we partner, do we build that expertise in-house, or do we buy a company to get into it? And we chose to acquire a company to get into that space. So it really does kind of span the spectrum. Originally, it was all about customer acquisition. Mm-hmm. So we were buying competitors that were competing against us in our space to buy their market share.
How early was that?
Oh, geez.
Ballpark.
I'm horrible with dates. Ballpark, probably like 5-6 years in, about our first company. And it was really, really scary, as you might imagine. But But it worked out really well and allowed us to grow in the market a lot quicker. And then we've had, because of that, we kind of leaned into that. We've had a lot of success. Not all of them have been successful, but the vast majority have been successful for us.
Interesting. All right. Let's go with Don.
Hi, Brian. I'm curious, what attracts technically gifted people to work for Hudl? And secondarily, are they the same reasons why more non-technical people like myself would want to work for Hudl? It's kind of a crazy question. What attracts people to work for the company?
I believe, I guess I'm very biased. Let's start with that, right? Because clearly it's my team, so I want to believe the best and hope for the best always. But I think Hudl strikes a pretty unique balance of our culture technically, where people work really hard and we have a lot of really smart people, but we do value work-life balance. We're not a coastal tech company that people are putting in 70 hours a week, 80 hours a week. Like, if you walk around the Hudl office in Lincoln at 5:30, most engineers are gone. And we very much support that. And so I think that's an interesting balance. I think people love the space that we work in. Working in sports tech is fun. It's exciting. We have cool customers. We have cool products that we build. We get a lot of cool perks of working with sports teams in terms of interacting with players and coaches. And I think tech and non-tech people enjoy that. Having a customer segment that's passionate is really nice. And it's a really cool advantage that I think we bring. I think every company probably says this, but we try to hire very smart people, and smart people like to work with smart people. So I think that's helpful. And I think that also applies in the tech and non-tech side. If you look at our support team, we take the same philosophy there. We try to punch above our weight on that team, and we hire very, very smart people. A lot of our positions across the company actually come out of our support department, like engineering and QA and sales, and several of our VPs at the company that are not in support came from support. That started in the support team. So we try to punch above our weight there and use that as an incubator program also for the rest of the company and provide a lot of career opportunities. And I think everyone really appreciates that, not just the support team, but the rest of the company appreciates that we invest a lot in people in that area too.
So I was curious, so you were telling me before about camera systems, and I'm wondering if you augment your camera inference with some sensors on the players, or some IMUs, gyros for shock detection or whatever.
That's a very hot topic in our industry right now. I boil it down to optical performance information on athletes versus wearables, and it's the topic du jour right now, truthfully. So very, very contextual question. My opinion is I think we can accomplish most of our goals with pure camera systems, and we've taken that approach as a company. We've really leaned into it. So we are not in the wearable space at all today. Again, I am opinionated on that. A lot of people disagree with me. So I'm not saying I'm correct. That's just my opinion on it. We have shown pretty good success around that, but it's challenging, right? If you have a sensor, whether it's your watch or custom-made wearable, you're going to get a lot more accurate positioning. You're often going to get things like heart rate. You're going to get a lot more nuance in the movement. Things like occlusions from video are much easier to deal with. But at the same time, you only get one team. And most sports are two teams. And so, it's very rare that both teams would aggregate the information together. Well, if you only have half of the information for a game, it's very challenging. So that's why I believe in optical. We've shown really good success with our camera systems in optical tracking and optical performance aggregation. So I still do believe in it. I do think there's a space for wearables in training, though. So in training, it's much more about load. So it's effort athletes are putting out. Things like heart rate matter, hydration matters. And so I think that there's a space for wearables there, personally. But in game, I'm a little more of an optical man myself.
Okay. So do you also do 3D density reconstruction with all your cameras? Just curious, just to happen that.
So we don't today because we have single angle capture.
Okay.
But we've done some experience with that. We do things like pose estimation though on the cameras, and that kind of helps with that, right? We can do kind of dumb 3D reconstruction, and we can put a mesh on someone and we can get at least part of it. And because we have continuity of video, athletes often turn, right? And so we can actually build a model over time reasonably well. And so we can do some of that, but it's not a huge part of our world, honestly, right now.
Let's go over here.
When you started doing the programming, what languages and platforms were you using? What did you
Yeah, that's a funny question. So my background was my previous job before starting Hudl was an intern at Microsoft. And so my biases lean towards Microsoft tech because of that. So we were a C# shop, and we have been since day one, which is a little unique in the startup world, I think. But we've stuck with that ever since. Nowadays it's a little weird, right? Because we've got a lot of mobile apps. So you've got Java, and you got Objective-C and Swift, and we have a ton of JavaScript clearly because web, and we use React Native also for a lot of our mobile now. And so JavaScript has a much more predominant role in our world. Most of our ML systems are at least done initially in Python. Our camera systems are all C++. So we have a lot more diversity than we used to. Some of our production systems are written in Go. Some of our kind of low-level on-device stuff is in Rust now. So we do kind of span a number of different languages, but the bulk of our code is C# and JavaScript nowadays.
Hi, I'm Molly. I just launched a parenting app a month ago actually, called Care Finder.
Congrats.
And thank you. I just wanted to go back to what you were talking about originally, about sort of like features and deciding what to build, because I understand, right, like customer feedback is huge, but sometimes customers don't know what they need.
Yep.
Sometimes, they lead you astray. And so it's hard striking that balance.
Yep.
And listening to them versus sticking with your vision. So I was just curious what your perspective is on that.
It is hard, and if you can get a mass of customers, it helps, but sometimes you don't have that option, right? And so my advice in that situation is fail fast. So try things and be willing to get out there as quick as possible. And MVP term gets misused all the time. It does actually have to be viable. I love the diagram that shows MVP of a car, and it's like a bike with no wheels. That's not an MVP, right?
Yeah.
But fail fast and be willing to roll stuff back. So I'll give you an example. We launched this feature that I was so excited about during COVID, and it was a remote collaboration module, and allowed our coaches to have a shared platform where they could be watching video and making notes, and it would synchronize all the athlete computers so they could all be in a virtual film session. And oh my gosh, I was so excited about it. We rolled it out. Nope, fell on its face. And every coach told us they wanted it, right? So we had a lot of customer feedback. Everyone used it for about a week or two, and then usage just went like this. And we've killed it. We pulled it out of the product completely. And we tried to keep that cycle as tight as possible. If you can keep it to weeks or low months, that's a huge W. Otherwise, you're going to be supporting that thing for years. So get it out of there. If it's not working, just move on. Obviously you can do things like A/B testing, but that takes twice as much work, so that's tough. But so fail fast whenever you can.
Thanks.
Yep.
We'll do one more question.
Okay. When I listen to these things, I hear constantly talking about the competition for the customers and identifying the market and that, right? And especially in post-COVID world, I feel like there's a big miss here because the other main area of competition is for those very smart people you're talking about.
Oh yeah.
Right? And I feel that, and I would like advice on how to move into this, if I should move into this. I think we're missing something, just straight up high school graduates. Everybody wants only that, right? Only the very cream, which is, and that makes sense. But we also have this enormous untapped job market that nobody's trying to reach into and penetrate. So is that a thing that you see that would be possible in a technology company? And if so, how?
Yeah. The short answer is yes, it is possible and it is necessary, but it is really challenging. So there's a lot of ways you can do that. We've actually been building pipelines in the past year since the start of COVID into community colleges and trying to take that route, because I think that's an underserved, under-tapped market. But I will say you can't fill a technical team with all junior people. You just can't. That's just reality. So you got to find your right balance and mix. And so for us, it's looking at our squads and understanding, okay, I've got one, not just senior person, but someone that's a really good mentor. Okay, I can slot in 2 or 3 junior people. But if I make it all junior or all senior, then it kind of falls apart. So I think that's the tough part is if you're trying to tap that pipeline, you really need to know your team in advance and understand that dynamic. But there is a big underserved opportunity there. We are working in that as a company. We're branching out to a lot of underrepresented colleges. We're going to be sponsoring some. It's kind of a mix between an apprenticeship and a full-time job offer. There's this program in Lincoln where you can sponsor underrepresented, mainly immigrants that have come but have a technical background that don't have opportunity, and you can basically give them an apprenticeship, but you have a guaranteed full-time offer for them, assuming things go reasonable. And that's a really, really cool program. Like, that's a major underserved population in Lincoln and Omaha. And so I think there's programs that can help with that, but it's a big challenge. Like, it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of money, quite frankly, to do that. You don't get it for free, but it's a worthwhile endeavor, I think.
All right. Is there anything that Hudl is working on now, whether that's hiring or community engagement or things you'd like to see from the community more of, that kind of startup grind in our community can kind of evangelize in the area?
Yes, I mean, surprise, surprise, we are hiring, as I'm sure most people are. I think we have something like 60 or 70 open roles right now, so we're kind of hiring across
a whole range?
The whole spectrum. So everything from technical to not technical and everything in between in multiple locations. We're long-term, we're going to be a hybrid work company, so you can come in the office if you want, you can work from home, so we have a lot of flexibility there for depending on how you feel about that, but we would love to hire more people in Nebraska, even though we are a hybrid company. It's very important to us. It's important for our culture. We like having the opportunity to get people together when we can. So if you know of people that are looking for jobs, if anyone else is, we would love to have you. Feel free to email me, brian.kaiser@hudl.com, or jobs@hudl.com, and lots of opportunity there.
All right. Thank you so much. If everyone can give a round of applause.
Great. Thank you.